Welcome to Cinematic Recaps. Today, we're diving into one of the most iconic sci-fi films of the 21st century, James Cameron's Avatar from 2009. So buckle up, folks, because spoilers are ahead. The movie opens with Jake Sully, a former Marine paralyzed from the waist down. Jake's in a bar for a drink and sees a lady being assaulted by a man and decides to intervene. He pulls the man's chair, bringing him onto the floor, and begins punching him when the bouncers step in and throw him out of the club. He tells them they've lost a customer. Just then, he's approached by two men in suits who come to talk about his twin brother. He goes with them and finds out his brother Tommy has been killed from a fatal mugging. Jake's twin brother was originally supposed to take part in the Avatar program, a project designed by the Resource Development Administration, RDA, to create human Na'vi hybrids, or avatars. He agrees to take his brother's place since their genome is compatible. He and others hired by the RDA are transported in cryopods for 5 years, 9 months and 22 days to a distant moon called Pandora. On Pandora, they land at a military base and are all asked to put on masks as the air isn't breathable by humans. The recruits are briefed about Pandora by the Chief of Security, Colonel Miles Quaritch, who tells them their mission on Pandora is to provide security and face a race of indigenous people called the Na'vi outside the fence. While getting acquainted with the area, Jake is approached by Norm Spellman, who went through the Avatar training with his brother. Norm takes him to the connection room where the avatars are grown, and the doctor in charge shows him his avatar. Next, Dr. Grace Augustine, the head of the Avatar program, meets with the two new recruits and isn't pleased to see Jake instead of his brother. She confronts the head of the RDA, Parker, about sending in Jake, a jarhead dropout, instead of his brother Tommy, the researcher. Parker reminds Grace that she and her team are tasked with finding a diplomatic solution to their problems by infiltrating the Na'vi people to win their trust and favor in mining a rare and valuable mineral called unobtainium, which sells for $20 million a kilo. Grace takes her team to run a trial test on the new avatars. She assists Jake get set up. Inside the chamber, Jake falls asleep and wakes up in the body of his avatar, his first words being, "Hey guys." Jake's excited to see he can walk in his new avatar body and runs out of the room while Norm follows behind to bring him back in. He runs through the training yard and comes to a stop at the garden, where he sees Grace's avatar, and she throws him a fruit. Later, it's nighttime, and the avatars retire. Jake's back in his original body and displeased. Next, Jake meets Trudy, a combat pilot. She takes him around the garage and asks him to be her door gun, and finally takes him to see the colonel. He meets the colonel for a chat. The colonel tells Jake about his first missions and how far he's come since then. He tells Jake to learn everything about the Na'vi, gain their trust, and report back to him. He continues saying that if Jake gets him what he needs, he'll see to it that he gets his legs back. Grace and her team go on a mission transported by Trudy in her helicopter. They pass through stunning landscapes, viewing the beautiful creatures on Pandora. Later, they land in an open space in the deep forest and take a walk through the trees. Jake sees a group of lemurs jumping through the trees searching for food. They enter an abandoned lug house, and Grace tells them it used to be a school. Jake sees bullet holes on the walls and asks her what happened, but she dodges his question, telling him to come help out. They continue heading north in the forest. Grace and Norm stop to conduct tests on a tree's roots, and Jack leaves after he hears noises in the distance and goes to investigate. He sees a vegetation of mushroom-like plants and touches one of them. Quickly, he realizes they are sensitive to touch. Just then, he sees a beast almost like a rhino but with horns shaped like a hammer. The beast isn't happy seeing him in its territory and charges at him. He charges back and the beast steps back. Just then, he realizes there's a predator behind him. He runs and it chases after him, biting its way through the forest to get him as a snack. The beast grabs him by his backpack and he unbuckles it, falling to the ground, and quickly jumps into a waterfall. He gets out of the water and sees the wild beast still on his trail. He later finds a stick and sharpens its edge to use as a weapon. As he silently walks through the forest, Neytiri, the chief's daughter hiding in a tree, attempts to shoot him with an arrow. A seed from the spirit tree lands on the arrow and she draws back. Later, Grace and the other teammates search for Jack but can't find him. They then decide to go and come back in the morning. At night, Jack makes a fire to scare off forest dogs looking to eat him for dinner. The animals are persistent and go after him as he tries to run. He tries to fight them off on his own, but Neytiri, watching in the bushes, steps in and helps him. After the fight, she picks up the burning stick and throws it into the river. Jake goes to pick it up and is amazed at the beautiful nightlight produced by the forest plants. He thanks Neytiri for saving his life, but she ignores him and walks away. Jack goes after her, calling her to wait up. He touches her and she strikes at him with her bow, telling him not to thank her, as killing the creatures was entirely his fault. He stands up and asks her why she saved him. She answers, "You have a strong heart, but stupid and ignorant, like a child." He continues to go after her, asking her to teach him. She tells him no, and he asks where she learned to speak English. Neytiri tells him to go back. Just then, seeds from the sacred tree land on him. He hits them, but she stops him. She tells him they're seeds of the sacred tree. He asks why they land on him and she tells him to follow her. As they move through the trees, a bolus ties his feet. He loses balance and falls off the tree. A group of tribemen approach him on horses with arrows pointing at him. Neytiri quickly steps in and tells them to calm down. Sute, the leader of the men, tells her his kind is forbidden there. By his kind, he means dream walkers. She tells him it's a matter for the psych. Sute then orders the men to bring Jake to the village. Later, they arrive at the village and everyone stares at him, gathering around the chief, who happens to be Neytiri's father. He asks why she didn't kill him and brought him to the village instead. She tells him there was a sign from Awa. Jake gets uneasy by what's going on and tries to greet the chief but is immediately stopped by his soldiers. Suddenly, a lady walking down the tree orders them to step back. She tells them she will examine the alien. She asks for his name and he answers. She quickly takes out a bone needle, pricks his chest and tastes his blood. She asks why he's come to them and he answers, I've come to learn. She tells him there's nothing they can teach him and he quickly begins to tell his story to the people. He tells them he is a soldier of the flying people. Sute, hearing this, is eager to fight and kill him, but the chief stops him and tells the villagers they have to learn about him. Neytiri is tasked with teaching Jake the ways of the Na'vi. Later, she takes him to a night gathering of the tribe while they have dinner. As he walks past the group sitting, he steps on the tails of others. Jake asks for her name and she tells him it's Neytiri. When Jake retires for the night and falls asleep, he's back at the base with the other teammates standing beside him. The next morning at breakfast, they talk about his time with the Na'vi tribe. Later, Jake tells the colonel and Parker about his experience with the Na'vi people. Parker tells him to find out what they want as they've turned down everything they've offered them and that their village sits on the richest unobtainium deposit. Jake is given 3 months to get the Na'vi people to move from their village or they'll be forced out. Before going back, Jake is briefed on a few things about the leaders of the Na'vi tribe since he never had any training on the tribe. Grace tells him not to do anything stupid while he's there. Back at the Na'vi village, Neytiri teaches Jake how to ride on one of their horses. He pairs to the creature with his hair through a process called the bond. This allows him to feel the creature's emotions and tell it what to do inside his head. Knowing this, he tells it to go forward and it does so. He loses balance and falls off it. Just then, Sute and another soldier approach them. He tells Jake to go away. Back at the base, Jack tells the colonel everything he's gathered so far on the tribe. Grace later finds out Jake's been reporting to the colonel and decides to move her entire operations to a place called the Hallelujah Mountains. Trudy transports them and their avatars to the mountains. Along the way, Jake learns it's a place filled with floating mountains and is amazed by the view. Grace explains to him unobtainium is a kind of superconductor and is the reason the mountains float. They arrive at a house on the top of one of the mountains. Inside the container house, Jake and the others set up. Next, Neytiri takes Jake to the top of the sacred tree. She calls out her Ikran and tells Jake not to look in its eyes. She tells him if he must become a hunter, he must find and choose his own Ikran, and it must choose him. Back at the house, Jake isn't motivated to do another video log, but Grace insists he must. As the dateline approaches for Jake to give feedback on his mission, he continues to learn more about the ways of the Na'vi tribe, getting better at every training. Grace is finally allowed back into the village. Jake gets back from his mission, and Grace tells him he's losing weight from his frequent use of his avatar and barely eating anything. During his meal, Jake again asks Grace what happened at the school in the forest. She tells him, Neytiri's sister with other young villagers who got tired of their activities decided to burn down one of their bulldozers believing Grace would protect them, but the troopers followed them to the school and killed them right in front of Neytiri. The next day, Jake and Neytiri go hunting. He kills an animal and sends its spirit to Awa. Neytiri then decides he's ready and takes him to choose an Ikran. They climb through a ladder of rocks to get to Ura, where the mountain banshee lives. When they get up the mountain, Jake's told to go first and chooses Ikran. Before he leaves, he asks Neytiri how he'll know the Ikran chooses him. She tells him it will try to kill him. As he walks in the midst of the Ikrans with a rope in his hands, they fly away. One of them attacks and tries to kill him. He uses his rope to tie its mouth. Quickly, he climbs onto it. The Ikran struggles to get rid of Jake and the rope, but he grabs strong to it as he tries to match the bond. The Ikran hits his head, and he falls off, hanging at the edge of a cliff. He quickly climbs back up and rushes on the back of the Ikran, pins it down, and finally makes the bond. Just then, Neytiri walks up and tells him the first flight seals the bond, and he goes for a flight. The Ikran resists his attempts, but he yells, "Shut up and fly straight!" And quickly the beast obeys. Neytiri gets on her Ikran and joins Jake on the flight. It's a fun and exciting moment for both of them. Later, Jake and Neytiri join the others who are out hunting. Jake and Neytiri, while hunting, become the hunted as they get chased by a bigger yellow bird. They escape the bird and seek shelter under the trees. Later, Neytiri takes him to see the skeletons of one of the birds. She tells him it's called the Great Leonopteryx, and that her great-great-grandfather was the last rider. She goes on to tell him that only 5 people have ever successfully rode on a Great Leonopteryx. When Jake wakes up in his real body, he feels like being out there, and his avatar is the real world, and his life is the dream world. He goes back to give his report to the colonel, who assures him his legs are a done deal. Jake tells the colonel there's one more thing he has to do before leaving Pandora. Later, Jake is initiated through a ritual that signifies he has finally become a man and a member of the Na'vi tribe. Later that night, Neytiri takes Jake to a place they call the Place of Prayers and tells him the voice of their ancestors will listen and answer their prayers there. Jake bonds with them. He tells her he can hear them. Neytiri tells him now he's a man, he has to choose a woman from the village. He tells her he's already chosen, and the woman is her. They bond and end up clapping. The next morning, Neytiri is woken by the sounds of bulldozers tearing through the forest. She tries to wake Jake, who's left his avatar and is now in his human form. She pulls his body away from the falling trees so it doesn't get crushed. Jake quickly eats up and goes back into the neuro chamber. Immediately, he falls unconscious and wakes up in his avatar form. Jake rushes and stands in front of the camera view and signals to the bulldozer controllers to wait, but Parker tells them to carry on. He gets angry and destroys the cameras. Back at the base, the colonel sees the videotape, feels betrayed, and walks away angrily. At the Na'vi village, the chief gathers his people around and tells them Tsute will lead the war party. Grace steps in and tells them attacking will only make it worse. Jake steps in and agrees with her. Tsute then asks Neytiri if she's clapped Jake, and she says yes. Tsute gets mad and strikes at Jake, wanting to fight him, but Jake knocks him down. The colonel and others arrive at the house where Jake and Grace's bodies are and pull the links, forcing their avatars to go unconscious. While Jake is unconscious, Tsute tries to slit his throat. Neytiri quickly steps in and stops him. At the base, the colonel talks to Jake about his betrayal and consequences. Grace steps in and tries to explain to them the errors of their actions and the importance of the trees they destroyed. She explains the roots are a connection unlike anything she's ever seen and can be used to store information for centuries that can only be downloaded by the Na'vi. But Parker thinks it's nonsense. At night, the Na'vi set fire to the bulldozers. The next morning, a team goes to the site and sends back reports of the situation to Colonel Miles and Parker. Colonel Miles tells Parker he can get the Na'vi people out of the way if he will approve. Parker approves. Later, Grace and Jake go to meet Parker. They tell him they can get the Na'vi to move. He gives them 1 hour to get it done. Back at the village, Jake and Grace rush to meet with Chief Idekin and tell him the message from Parker, urging him to order his people to evacuate. Neytiri then finds out Jake knew about the attack from the very beginning. She cries out in betrayal and walks away. Chief Idekan orders Tsute to bind Jake and Grace. Colonel Miles and a flight of gunships approach the village. Jake and Grace cry out to Idekan to order an evacuation. Chief Idekan orders Tsute to take the Ikrans and attack from above, while Colonel Miles orders the pilots to fire tear gases and scare off the Na'vi. But the Na'vi still resist and start shooting arrows at the helicopters. The colonel again orders the pilots to fire missiles at the home tree. The tree is set ablaze and the chief orders everyone to move into the forest. While the villagers run into the village, Moat cuts Jake and Grace loose, begging them to help the Na'vi. Colonel Miles orders the pilots to switch missiles and fire to bring down the home tree. When they cease fire, the tree is weakened and falls, destroying everything in its path. Seeing as their home is destroyed, the Na'vi cry out. Later, Neytiri finds her dad fatally wounded. He hands her his bow before his death. At the base, Parker orders the soldiers to pull out the link on Grace and Parker. When they wake up, he orders the soldiers to take them away. Grace and Norm try to fight back as the soldiers take Jake away. Grace and her team are locked away. However, Trudy and Max walk in and break them out. The colonel is notified when Trudy starts her helicopter to take off. He rushes out of the room with a gun and starts firing at them. They manage to escape, but Grace is wounded. They pick up one of the trailers containing the neural chambers and head into the woods where they cannot be traced. Norm tries to stop Jake from going back, telling him Tsute is now chief and won't want him around. Alone and now an outcast, Jake walks through the burnt forest, thinking to himself a plan to win back the trust of the Na'vi. Just then, his Ikran lands before him. He rides his Ikran to hunt the Great Leonopteryx and bond with it, for it was his only hope. As the tribespeople gather around the tree praying, their attention is drawn away when they see the Great Leonopteryx. The people run back in fear at the sight of the beast. As he walks among them, they all chant out the name, Toruk Makto. Neytiri walks to him and tells him she is afraid for her people. Jake tells Tsute he's willing to serve the Omaticaya people, and Tsute tells him they will fly together. Jake tells them Grace is dying, and he needs Awa's help to save her. Grace's avatar and real body are placed under the sacred tree. The Na'vi people pray to Awa, the All-Mother, to revive her. Grace wakes up and tells Jake she's with Neytiri's sister, and soon after she dies. Jake asks for Sute's permission to speak to the people, and Sute offers to translate. Jake tells the people to ride as far as they can to the other tribes and asks them to join the fight against the Sky People. He tells them to unite as one, and the Omaticaya people will show the Sky People they can't take anything they want. The people cheer at his speech, rush on their Ikrons, and ride off. They rode out to the Four Winds, the Horse Clan, and the Adrian people of the Eastern Sea, and they all answered the call of Omaticaya and came. Back at the base, Colonel Miles tells his soldiers about the increased numbers of the Na'vi people. He tells them they have to strike now before their numbers grow and overrun the base. The soldiers cheer and gear up for battle. Max calls Jake and his team and warns them about the colonel's plans. Trudy tells him they're going against a force greater than they can handle. Jake tells them they'll have to let the colonel bring the fight to them, as this will give them a tactical advantage. At night, Jake goes to the Tree of Souls and pray for Awa's blessings. Neytiri tells him Awa does not take sides but protects only the balance of nature. It's morning at the base and a flight of fighter jets takes off from the base. The Na'vi also leave for battle on their Ikron. The soldiers are dropped off on the ground and the jets make their way to the target. They notice movements on their sensors and ask their soldiers on the ground to halt. The warriors on Ikrons, led by Jake Sully, begin attacking the fighter jets, shooting at them with arrows. The soldiers on the ground open fire at the Horse Clan, shooting them off their horses, and they return fire with arrows. The colonel sees Jake flying on the great Leonopteryx and orders the pilot to shoot him down. Jake flies away and they follow. Just then, Trudy steps in and assists Jake, firing at the colonel's jet. Neytiri evades a pilot who's bent on shooting her down. As she flies into the forest, she's shot down, and her Ikron is killed in the process. Tsudi attacks the helicopter carrying the bombs. He's shot by a soldier and falls off. The colonel fires at Trudy's helicopter. It explodes, killing her. Neytiri is pinned down, alone, and with no means of escape. Jake tells her not to attack. Just when all hope is lost, suddenly a herd of wild beasts runs past Neytiri. They attack and kill the soldiers standing in their path. Neytiri tells Jake, Awa has heard his prayers. The Akrans with no riders attack the gunships. Jake lands on the bomber and drops a grenade. It destroys one of its engines as it prepares to drop. This stares it in a different direction and crashes it to the ground. He lands on the colonel's gunship and attempts to drop a second grenade, but the colonel steers the ship to a different direction, and Jake loses balance and falls to the edge. He takes out a missile and launches it into the blade of the ship, causing it to explode. Jake then falls to the ground. The colonel gets into his armored suit and jumps off the ship before it explodes. Colonel Miles makes his way through the forest and finds the house where Jake's body is. He gets closer and aims to fire, but Neytiri, riding on an animal, quickly steps in and stops him. They fight, and she destroys his weapon. Colonel Miles takes out a knife and brutally stabs the animal, killing it. The dead animal has Neytiri pinned down. The colonel is about to kill her when Jake arrives. He tells the colonel it's over. He replies, Jake, nothing's over while I'm still breathing. The two men battle, and Jake breaks through the colonel's glass shield and stabs him. This causes oxygen to flow out of the armored suit. Quickly, he gets a mask and puts it on. The colonel tells Jake it's time to wake up. He destroys the container house where Jake's body is, but doesn't find him. The broken glass forces oxygen to run low in the chamber where Jake is. Jake steps in and tries to stop the colonel, but his human body runs short on oxygen, and his avatar loses consciousness. The colonel grabs him by the hair, takes out his knife, and prepares to end him. Suddenly, Neytiri's arrow hits his heart, and he falls to the ground. Neytiri tries to wake Jake and realizes she has to find his real body. Jake wakes up and tries to grab an oxygen mask but passes out. Neytiri rushes in, grabs the mask, and puts it on, reviving Jake. Neytiri and Jake meet Sute, who is dying from his wounds. Sute tells Jake to take over the responsibility of leading the people and hands him a knife to kill him. After the war, the surviving humans are sent back to their planet, and only a chosen few are left behind. Jake records his final video log on his birthday. At the Tree of Souls, Awa chooses which body is right for Jake. Jake fully transitions into his avatar body permanently, becoming one of the Na'vi and finding his true purpose. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications as it helps the channel grow. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.